Hey guys, tonight we're heading to Campion, Australia, in 1932. A dusty little place where farmers took on an army of emus and, well, lost spectacularly. Picture yourself sitting on a creaky porch swing, a glass of sweet tea in hand. The hum of cicadas filling the warm Virginia night air as we ease into this quirky tale. There's a far cry from your modern worries. Imagine no Wi-Fi, no air conditioning, just the wide-open fields and a stubborn flock of birds. You'd sure not survive that if you had to deal with this mess every day, trust me. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here at Sleepy History Narratives. And don't forget to tell me where you are, what time it is there, huh? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're stepping into Campion now, the red earth crunching under your boots, the scent of dry grass and wildflowers in the air. It's the height of the Great Depression, and folks like John, a weathered farmer with calloused hands, are fighting to keep their wheat fields alive. The sun beats down like a relentless summer day in Kansas, and you can almost taste the dust. On your lips, a reminder of hard times. But there's a flicker of hope, until those emus show up, big as Thanksgiving turkeys, munching through the crops like they own the place. It's a sight that'd make you chuckle, yet it's a real headache. For John, who's seen better harvests, the villagers gather by the old oak tree, swapping stories over a slice of apple pie, wondering what on earth to do next. You're standing in the middle of Campion now, the year still 1932, and the Great Depression's grip feels as tight as a rusty old barn door that just won't budge. Farmers like John are up before dawn, their boots kicking up red dust as they check the fields, but their hearts are heavy, like the time you found your grandma's biscuit tin empty right before Thanksgiving, and you knew the table wouldn't. Feel the same. Money's scarcer than hen's teeth around here, and the wheat that John's been tending knee-high by the 4th of July last year is all he's got to keep the family fed through winter. You can almost hear the creak of his rocking chair on the porch, where he sits at night staring at the stars, wondering how to stretch a nickel into a dollar. But here's a little something most folks don't know. Back then, the Australian government was handing out land to World War I veterans, hoping they'd farm it and feed the nation, but they didn't count on the droughts turning the soil to dust. Historians still argue over whether the government's plan was a pipe dream from the start, or if nature just had other ideas. Either way, you feel the weight of it all as you walk past John's weathered barn, the paint peeling like an old quilt, and see the worry etched on his face. It's the kind of worry that makes you think of your own hard times, maybe that winter in Ohio when the snow buried the road, and you all huddled by the fireplace sharing stories to keep warm. John's got that same grit, though, the kind that keeps a farmer going, even when the odds are stacked against him like a bad hand at poker. You're strolling across Campion's fields now, the red dirt sticking to your boots, and suddenly those emus arrive like uninvited guests at a family reunion, hundreds of them, big as Thanksgiving turkeys, strutting through the wheat with no manners at all. You hear the rustle of their feathers, and the crunch of stalks underfoot, a sound that'd make your old hound dog perk up, ready to chase, though he'd probably trip over his own paws first. The air carries a hint of wild sage, mixing with the dry earth, and you can feel the tension rising as John stares out, hands on his hips. These birds aren't just a nuisance, they're eating his livelihood faster than you'd polish off a slice of pecan pie at the county fair. Now here's a quirky truth. Those emus could run up to 30 miles an hour, dodging bullets like they're starring in their own Western movie, leaving the soldiers in a cloud of dust. Historians still argue about whether their speed was sheer luck or a clever survival trick honed over centuries. You can't help but chuckle. Imagine trying to outrun them with your creaky knees, or worse, texting for help while they peck at your phone. John's muttering under his breath. Something about nature having the upper hand, and you feel a pang of sympathy, like when your garden got raided by rabbits and all you could do was shake your head. The villagers gather by the old barn, swapping stories over a jug of sweet tea, their laughter cutting through the frustration. Bless their hearts, they're making the best of it. You're lingering by John's kitchen now, the worn wooden table wobbling under a stack of unpaid bills, the faint smell of coffee lingering from a pot brewed hours ago. The Great Depression's hit hard, and you feel the weight of it as you run your fingers over the chipped edges, like tracing the cracks in your old porch steps back home in Idaho. John's dreaming of better days, his eyes drifting to the window, where the wheat once waved like a golden sea. Now it's a chewed-up mess thanks to those emus. You can almost hear the creak of the floorboards under his heavy sigh, a sound as familiar as the groan of your rocking chair after a long day tending. The garden. That's a quiet desperation, the kind that makes you want to offer him a slice of cornbread and a pat on the back. Here's a little tidbit most don't know. Those emu invasions weren't just random. They were driven by drought, pushing the birds to seek food where they could, turning Campion into an unexpected buffet. Historians still debate whether the government should have seen it coming, or if they were too busy polishing their boots to notice. You chuckle softly. Imagine the emus RSVPing to a picnic, showing up with napkins tucked under their wings. John's muttering about lost dreams, and you feel that pang again, like when your tractor broke down mid-harvest, leaving you knee-deep in mud and prayers. The villagers outside are humming a tune, maybe an old hymn from a Sunday service, their voices blending with the crickets. Bless their hearts. They're holding on to hope like it's the last jar of preserves from last fall. You're leaning against the barn now, the weathered wood warm under your palm, as word spreads that the Australian government's made a bold promise to save the day. They're sending soldiers to Campion, and you can almost smell the starch on their crisp uniforms as they roll in, all puffed up like roosters at a henhouse dance. John perks up a bit, his eyes lighting up like he's just won a blue ribbon at the county fair, hoping these lads with their shiny rifles will shoo those emus away faster than you can say, "Pass the gravy." The air's thick with anticipation, a mix of dust and the faint tang of gun oil, and you feel a flicker of excitement, though you can't help wondering if this'll end up like that time your nephew tried to fix the roof with duct tape and a prayer. Here's a funny twist. Those soldiers brought along machine guns thinking they'd turn this into a proper war, but the emus didn't get the memo about playing along. Historians still debate whether the government overestimated their firepower or underestimated those feathered rascals. You chuckle softly. Imagine the emus lining up for target practice, only to waddle off giggling. John's already picturing his field safe again, but you notice the villagers exchanging knowing glances, their rocking chairs creaking as they say of sweet tea. Bless their hearts, they've seen enough to know life's full of surprises. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the red earth, and you sense the stage is set for something wilder than a barn dance on a Saturday night. You're standing at the edge of John's field now, the red dirt stretching out like a patchwork quilt, as Major Meredith rolls into Campion with his small band of soldiers. He's a tall man with a stern face, as serious as a preacher on Easter Sunday, his boots kicking up dust clouds that shimmer in the morning light. You can hear the faint clink of their gear rifles slung over shoulders, and the sharp scent of polished leather cuts through the dry air. It's a sight that'd make you think of your uncle's old rodeo days, strutting in with a cowboy hat, ready to take on the world. Meredith surveys the fields, his jaw set like he's about to face a grizzly. But you can't help but grin. Bless his heart. He's about to tangle with a bunch of oversized birds, not a bear. Here's something most folks don't know. Meredith wasn't just any soldier. He was a World War I veteran, hand-picked for this odd mission because of his knack for strategy, though I reckon he didn't expect his enemy to have feathers. Historians still debate whether he was the right man for the job, or if the whole plan was as doomed as a snowman in July. You chuckle softly. Imagine him trying to round up these emus with a lasso, like some kind of outback cowboy. John's eye, watching from his porch, a flicker of hope in his eyes while the villagers whisper among themselves, their voices low like the hum of cicadas on a summer night in Virginia. The soldiers set up camp near the old oak tree, their tents popping up like mushrooms after a rain, and you feel the air shift. Something big's about to happen, but whether it's a victory or a flop, well, that's as uncertain as a South Carolina thunderstorm. The morning sun climbs higher over Campion, casting a golden glow across the red dirt, when the soldiers, led by Major Meredith, decide it's time to take action. Picture the scene. The clatter of machine guns echoes across the fields, a sharp, staccato rhythm that cuts through the stillness like a firecracker on the 4th of July. The emus scatter in every direction, their long legs kicking up dust as they run faster than a jackrabbit on a hot tin roof. You can almost feel the vibrations through the ground, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and the faint musk of those giant birds. It's a chaotic sight, one that'd make your grandpa laugh. Bless his heart. He'd say it's like trying to herd cats with a broom. Here's a surprising detail. Those machine guns, fancy as they were, only took down a handful of emus before jamming up in the dust, leaving the soldiers scratching their heads like they'd just lost a bet at the county fair. Historians still debate whether the weapons were the wrong choice for the job, or if the emus were just too clever for their own good. The villagers watch from a safe distance, gathered near John's barn, their whispers mingling with the hum of crickets. Some chuckle at the soldiers' flailing efforts, while others like John feel a pang of frustration, their hopes fading like the last light of a Kansas sunset. The gunfire slows, and a hush falls over the field, broken only by the distant squawk of an emu, nature's way of saying, "Nice try, but I'm still here." As the dust settles over Campion's fields, the emu's clever escape becomes the talk of the town, their long legs carrying them away with a grace that'd make any jackrabbit green with envy. Picture them darting through the wheat, their feathers ruffling in the breeze, moving so fast you'd swear they're part of some outback ballet. The soldiers stand there, rifles in hand, looking as bewildered as your old hound dog when he'd chase squirrels up a tree, only to realize they weren't coming down. Bless his heart, he never did learn. The air still smells of gunpowder, but now it's mixed with the earthy scent of trampled grass, and you can hear the faint squawk of the emus in the distance, almost like they're laughing at the whole fiasco. Here's a little-known fact. Emus have a knack for splitting into smaller groups when threatened, a survival trick that made them near impossible to pin down, like trying to catch fireflies with a net on a warm Ohio night. Historians still debate whether this was instinct, or if the birds were just plain smarter than the soldiers gave them credit for. John shakes his head, leaning against the barn door, his weathered hat tipped back as he mutters, "Those birds are sharper than a tack." You can't help but smile. Imagine them outsmarting Meredith's men like they're playing a game of hide-and-seek at a county fair. The villagers are starting to gather for supper, their voices soft as they share bread and stew, the firelight flickering like the glow of lanterns at a small-town harvest festival, reminding everyone that life goes on, even when the odds feel stacked against you. The fire crackled low, soft as rain tapping on a tin roof, while the villagers huddled around, nursing cups of weak coffee and stronger opinions. You can almost hear the creak of those old wooden stools and the hiss of the kettle hanging just above the flame. They weren't angry anymore, at least not all of them. Some just chuckled, shaking their heads like they'd just watched a cat, trying to chase its own tail. The soldiers, bless their hearts, were covered in dust, looking more like clumsy scarecrows than war heroes. One fella even had feathers stuck in his bootlaces. When he tripped over a loose fence post and landed face first in the dirt, the village blacksmith let out such a belly laugh it echoed all the way to the grain mill. It reminded everyone of the time Cousin Billy danced at the barn wedding, 3 steps behind the beat and still proud as a rooster in church. And just like that dance, the Emu War had become less about birds and bullets and more about the odd comedy of human pride, tangled in Mother Nature's stubborn humor. Laughter, you see, is the last refuge of common folks when things don't go to plan. And out here, under a sky blanketed with stars and cricket song, laughter was what held everyone together. The war might have been a mess, but by that firelight, it sure was one heck of a story. The next morning, with dew still hugging the tall grass and the sun barely stretching over the horizon, John stepped into what used to be his pride, the wheat field. Only now it looked like a dance floor after a rowdy Saturday barn party, stalks broken, grain scattered, and muddy emu prints like someone had hosted a muddy boot parade across his land. He stood quiet, his old straw hat casting a sleepy shadow over his eyes. There was that long sigh again, the kind you let out when you realize your favorite rocking chair just got taken by the neighbor's cat. Not angry, just tired in that way only a farmer can understand. He knelt down, picked up a single bent stalk of wheat, and brushed the dirt off like it were a child's scraped knee. The silence of the morning was broken only by the distant rustling of birds and the low creak of the windmill, turning slow and stubborn, just like John's spirit. It reminded him of that year when a late frost took out the pumpkins he'd been growing for the county fair. All that work, all those quiet mornings with his hands in the dirt, and still nature had her own plans. Sometimes life's like that. You plant, you pray, you plow, and then a bunch of oversized birds crash the party. Major Meredith, bless the man, stood there scratching his head under that stiff-brimmed military hat, watching feathers drift across the field like snowflakes. That had lost their season. His face, normally the shade of a dusty road, now blushed redder than a ripe tomato at the Sunday farmers' market. They had fired hundreds of rounds, and what did they have to show for it? Maybe a couple of startled birds and a broken pride. The emus? Oh, they were gone. Vanished into the horizon like your cousin Earl after someone mentioned dish duty at the family reunion. Even the town's mailman, who rarely said anything beyond "mornin'," muttered under his breath. Well, that went about as well as a screen door on a submarine. And that's when the laughter returned, soft like wind rustling cornstalks. Not mocking, just understanding. Meredith's men shuffled their boots, pretending to check their rifles, but you could tell they'd rather be anywhere else, maybe fishing at the creek or back home fixing that squeaky porch swing. It wasn't the loss that stung. It was losing to birds with no plan, no maps, no uniforms, Just wild instinct and legs faster than your Aunt Mabel's mouth at Sunday gossip hour. The kind of defeat that humbles even the most polished brass buttons. By the third week, the emus were no longer a novelty. They were a fact of life, like squeaky floorboards or that one sock that always vanishes in the laundry. John would wake up to the same view: wheat fields torn like old quilts and those big flightless birds standing proud as church steeples, pecking away like it was their birthright. Hope, once as bright as a fresh coat of barn paint, had started to peel. He didn't curse, didn't shout, just stared into the distance with that same empty look folks get after realizing the county fair cancelled the pie-eating contest. Each day, the soldiers came and went. Each day, the emus returned like they'd been invited back. The war had become a kind of chore, like chopping wood you know won't last through winter. Futile but somehow necessary. John leaned against the fence one afternoon, sipping coffee gone cold, and whispered, "Maybe they just want the wheat more than we do." And for a moment it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like watching the tide roll in, slow and unstoppable. Not angry, just tired. Well, after days of bird-chasing chaos and dignity in tatters, Major Meredith and his men did what any respectable group of stubborn folks might do. They came up with a new plan. Not necessarily a better one, but at least it sounded official. Ambushes. That was the word of the week. They figured if they couldn't outgun the emus, maybe they could outsmart 'em. So the soldiers crouched in the bushes before dawn, as quiet as Grandpa on his Sunday nap chair, except with more itchy uniforms and less snoring. They waited, and waited, and waited some more, until the morning chill crept up their sleeves and one private sneezed so loud a whole flock flapped off into the distance, laughing in bird language, or so it seemed. It felt a little like planning a church potluck. You map everything out, assign who brings what, even double-check the pies, and somehow still, there's always a surprise or someone shows up with 4 green bean casseroles and no forks. But Meredith wasn't ready to give up. No, sir. He believed. In strategy, in patience, in military order. Trouble was, and the emus didn't read the battle plan. The plan had seemed foolproof on paper. Wait for the emus, lie still, jump out at just the right moment. Simple as Sunday stew, just toss in the ingredients and wait for the magic to happen. But as any seasoned potluck planner knows, something always bubbles over. By the 4th morning, Meredith's soldiers were tired of being quiet. One had developed a sneeze from lying in the hay, another kept dozing off in the tall grass, and a third had been bitten by what he swore was a mosquito the size of a hummingbird. Morale was lower than a tire in February. They spotted the birds. A line of emus, heads bobbing up and down like fence posts in a windstorm, came sauntering toward the baited field. Hearts quickened, fingers tightened around triggers. The moment had come. But just as the signal was about to be given, something remarkable happened. Something that historians and biologists alike would later scratch their heads over. The emus stopped, right at the edge of the ambush zone. They tilted their heads, peered around like suspicious neighbors. Then, with not a single sound, turned in near-perfect unison and headed back the way they came. Like church ladies realizing someone brought a better casserole to the picnic. One soldier blinked. Another whispered, "Did they figure us out?" Meredith said nothing, just stared at the empty field, now holding nothing but the rustle of the wind and the crushing weight of being outwitted by birds. Not even clever birds. Birds with brains, the size of a walnut. But sometimes you see instinct is mightier than intellect. The emus didn't need strategy, didn't need maps, didn't read Clausewitz, they just felt something was off. Maybe it was the twitch of a rifle barrel, or the unfamiliar scent of boot polish on morning dew, or maybe, just maybe, they had seen enough from past days to know when a trap was a trap. Back at the camp that night, the fire burned low. The laughter was softer now, tinged with disbelief. One villager said it reminded him of trying to keep raccoons out of the sweet corn. You think you've got 'em beat, and then bam, they're back with 3 cousins and a plan. Meredith leaned back in his folding chair, the canvas creaking beneath him. He didn't speak much, just sipped on lukewarm tea and watched the smoke drift up toward a sky full of stars, like questions with no answers. That evening, Campion glowed with a warmth that no military plan could ever replicate. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds a faded orange like peach jam spread thin on toast. Crickets were already singing, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with the scent of earth just kissed by dusk. Around the campfire, villagers and soldiers gathered again. No one talked of tactics. No one cleaned their rifles or sharpened bayonets. Instead, someone passed around a dented tin pot of stew, thin but hot, and someone else shared a slice of dry cornbread, still wrapped in a red-checkered napkin that had seen better days. Laughter started slow. A soft chuckle here, a knee slap there. It built like the rising warmth of a potbelly stove on a cold morning. One farmer started retelling the day's battle, describing how an emu had outrun 2 soldiers and then circled back like it was showing off. Another swore he saw one bird wink before vanishing into the scrub. Even Major Meredith cracked a grin, just a little one, when someone mimicked his orders in a dramatic slow-motion drawl. "Men, hold your fire. The birds behind you." The crowd erupted in laughter, not mean-spirited, but the kind that bonds people together, like shared chores on a hard day's harvest. That night it didn't feel like a war zone. It felt like a family reunion held under a wide country sky, the kind where uncles tell tall tales, kids chase fireflies with mason jars, and Grandma hands out peppermint candies from her apron pocket. The failures of the morning had faded into folklore by evening, transformed from frustration into story. Someone pulled out a harmonica and played a tune soft and slow, not a song of victory or glory, but of simple days, dusty roads, and rocking chairs left creaking in the wind. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. And in that moment, everyone there, farmer or fighter, felt a little less alone. The emus may have won the field that day, but around that campfire, under stars older than any empire, it was the people who found their strength, not in triumph, but in laughter, not in victory, but in shared humanity. The stars had come out in quiet confidence, scattered across the sky like breadcrumbs left by angels trying to find their way back home. Campion had gone still. Not silent, no. There was still the gentle rustle of grass in the evening breeze, the faint creak of old porch boards settling in for the night, and the far-off hoot of an owl sounding like a bedtime story with feathers. John sat on his porch swing, the one his father had built with cedar wood and thick rope back when things felt simpler, when a man's biggest worry was a leaky roof or whether the biscuits would rise right. He rocked back and forth, slow as molasses on a winter morning, eyes fixed somewhere between the stars and his own thoughts. Beside him sat his dog, Huck, snoring soft and steady, occasionally twitching like he was dreaming of chasing emus or maybe rabbits, the more manageable kind. A mason jar of tea, now lukewarm, sat on the railing beside him, catching the starlight just enough to sparkle like a memory he hadn't quite let go of. He wasn't thinking of the lost wheat anymore. That pain had dulled into something less sharp, more like a familiar ache in the knees after a long day's work. Instead, his thoughts wandered to the absurdity of it all. Soldiers with machine guns chasing flightless birds, battles fought, without banners, victories measured in chuckles rather than medals. He thought about how life rarely made sense when you were standing in the middle of it. But sit down, let the night wrap around you like a quilt passed down through generations, and suddenly it all becomes a little clearer. Maybe not in facts or reasons, but in feeling. John let out a breath, long, slow, thoughtful. His grandma. She used to say, "Sometimes the good Lord don't fix the fence, son. He just teaches you to live with the holes." And tonight, that seemed truer than any speech a politician ever gave. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, more birds maybe, or maybe just the same tired sun rising over a field of half-grown hope. But for now, he was here, swinging, breathing, remembering. And that was enough. The wind picked up just a hair, carrying with it the scent of hay and riverbank, of old wood and something faintly sweet, like the honeysuckle that used to bloom along the fence line when he was a boy. And for just a moment John felt it okay. The wind sighs across the trampled wheat fields, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. John stands there, shoulders squared, watching the emus, those relentless creatures with their knowing eyes and unyielding stride. They don't just run, they endure. It reminds him of the old oak tree behind his house, the one that weathered countless storms, its roots buried deep in the earth, refusing to yield. The soldiers reload, adjusting their stance, determination, flickering in their faces. The plan is clear, cut them off, encircle them, but the emus, they seem to anticipate every move. As the men step forward, the birds split, darting in different directions, each one using the landscape like an old friend vanishing into the scrub. Watching them go, John can't help but admire their defiance. The farmers came armed with desperation. The birds arrived with instinct honed by the land itself. He thinks about survival, not just the emus, but his own. The Great Depression looms over him like a restless shadow. The harvest was supposed to be his salvation, a way to feed his family, a way to hold on to his land. Now it slips through his fingers, trampled under talons built for running, not understanding. He exhales, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his chest, as he glances at the setting sun. Maybe survival isn't about conquering. Maybe it's about adapting, learning, finding a way forward, just as the emus have done for generations. The soldiers exchange weary glances, Major Meredith rubbing his temples. It's clear now. This isn't just a battle of bullets against birds. It's a contest of grit, of determination, of knowing when to stand firm and when to bend. And tonight, as the last of the emus disappear into the horizon, one thing is certain: their instinct to endure will outlast every effort to break them. The night deepens, stretching across the horizon like an old quilt worn soft with time. The laughter from the campfire has faded, leaving only the low hum of crickets and the occasional rustling of wheat in the breeze. But Major Meredith isn't laughing. He's standing rigid, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the darkness as if willing it to yield. Stubbornness has set in now, thick as summer molasses. The defeat isn't just an inconvenience, it's an insult. The emus have won each, round, slipping through his grasp like rain through cracked earth. The reports he'll have to send won't read well, and the thought of it tightens his jaw. But there's something deeper gnawing at him, something that can't be written in official dispatches. It's the sinking feeling that brute force won't work, not against creatures that refuse to play by the rules. John watches from his porch swing, sipping lukewarm coffee. He's seen men like Meredith before, strong, determined, convinced. That sheer effort is enough. But life has a way of humbling the proud. The land doesn't bend to will alone. It demands patience, adaptation, a quiet understanding that some things can't be forced into submission. That's a lesson every farmer knows. The night stretches on, and still Meredith stands there, unmoving. His resolve is strong, stronger than reason, stronger than practicality. But strength without wisdom can be as fruitless as planting corn in rocky soil. And out there, beyond his watchful gaze, the emus keep running, just as they always have. The early morning light spills across the fields, casting long shadows where the wheat once stood proud. John doesn't need to step outside to know the damage. The scent of crushed stalks and disturbed earth carries into his kitchen with the soft breeze. The town murmurs with quiet conversation, the villagers gathering around the well, voices laced with both frustration and amusement. It's a peculiar thing, how failure can bring laughter just as easily as despair. Some shake their heads, muttering about the absurdity of it all, while others chuckle, recalling how soldiers with machine guns were undone by birds. Meredith's men had arrived with confidence, ready to eradicate the emu menace with swift efficiency. And yet here they stood, battle-worn and empty-handed, the enemy nowhere in sight but ever present in the footprints scattered across the land. John listens to the chatter, hands wrapped around his coffee mug, letting the voices drift in and out like the ebb and flow of a tide. It reminds him of arguments at the town diner, some folks pushing for the new stop sign at the intersection, others rolling their eyes at the fuss. No one ever truly agreed, but at the end of the day, they'd sit together, share a meal, and let the debate dissolve into laughter. And so it is now. The Emu War wasn't supposed to be a comedy, yet here they are finding humor in defeat. Maybe that's just how people survive, finding something to laugh about even when it seems the land itself is playing tricks on them. The villagers will still tend their farms, still mend fences, still press on. The emus will still run, and Meredith will still refuse to admit he's beaten. The cycle continues, like the wind rolling through the fields, whispering stories of stubborn men and untamed birds. The midday sun beats down on the dry earth, casting shimmering waves of heat over the battlefield, if you could even call it that. A soldier, rifle in hand, lunges forward, determination burning in his eyes. He's got his target, a lone emu, momentarily separated from the flock. Just a few more steps, just one clean shot. But then, like a cruel twist of fate, the ground betrays him. His boot catches on a stray rock, and before he can even process what's happening, he's tumbling forward in an explosion of dust and limbs. The rifle flies from his grasp, landing a few feet away, while he rolls gracelessly down a small slope, his hat bouncing off his head like a tumbleweed caught in the wind. The villagers, watching from a safe distance, erupt into laughter. It's not cruel laughter, just the kind that comes naturally when life takes an unexpected turn. The soldier groans, wiping dirt from his face, frustration mingling with embarrassment. The emu, meanwhile, doesn't even pause to acknowledge the scene. It simply continues its steady stride, head held high, as if to say, "You'll have to. Try harder than that, mate." John leans against his porch railing, shaking his head with a knowing smile. He's seen that kind of fall before, at the county fair rodeo, where young riders thought they had a bull figured out, only to be tossed into the dirt faster than they could blink. There's a certain lesson in it, one life tends to teach over and over. Confidence alone won't win the day. Sometimes it takes a little humility. As the soldier dusts himself off and retrieves his rifle, the laughter fades into murmurs. No one here is cruel enough to mock a man too much for trying. But still, as the story spreads through the village over the coming days, no one will forget the sight of him tumbling through the dust, arms flailing, defeated not by bullets but by the sheer unpredictability of the land itself. The afternoon sun casts long golden streaks over the dry plains, illuminating the emus as they move, steady, graceful, unbothered. Their feathers shimmer in the light, catching flecks of dust that rise with each effortless step. They are built for this land, shaped by its harshness, its unforgiving beauty. John watches from a distance, arms crossed, brow furrowed. He spent most of his life fighting against nature in one way or another, droughts, floods, failed harvests. But standing here now, watching the emus glide across the landscape, he wonders if maybe, just maybe, survival isn't about resisting. It's about adapting. Meredith's men, on the other hand, are struggling. They came with guns, with tactics, with the belief that strategy would win out. But the emus aren't soldiers. They don't play by rules or battle formations. They run, they scatter, and most impressively, they endure. Not a single soldier can match their speed, their ability to vanish into the land like ghosts. John remembers the wild mustangs he once saw at the county fair parade, how they moved with untamed elegance, free in a way that no fence or saddle could contain. The emus carry that same defiance, that same unwillingness to be conquered. And suddenly he sees it for what it is. They aren't pests. They aren't the enemy. They're survivors. The soldiers pause, their breath labored, their uniforms streaked with sweat and dust. Meredith clenches his jaw, frustration radiating off him, but deep down he knows what John does. The emus are built for survival in a way that no man, no rifle, no plan could ever fully overcome. The sun sinks lower, casting a warm amber glow over the farmhouse. John wipes the sweat from his brow, straightens his back, and takes a deep breath. He has spent the better part of the day tending to what remains of his wheat field, salvaging what little he can. The trampled stalks tell the story of a battle, not against soldiers, but against nature itself, a battle that, as always, nature has won. But quitting isn't in John's blood. He doesn't stomp his boots in frustration or curse the sky for his misfortunes. Instead, he kneels down, running his calloused fingers through the soil, feeling its stubbornness, its quiet promise of endurance. He thinks about his father and his father before him, how they had faced droughts, floods, and hardships that would have broken weaker men. And yet, the land endured, just like they did, just like he will. The emus, with their effortless defiance, remind him of that. They don't fight battles the way men do. They don't rage against the odds. They simply adapt, move forward, survive. He looks out over the open plains, watching them in the fading light, their silhouettes blending into the horizon. Perhaps there is wisdom in their resilience, a quiet understanding of the land that no rifle, no battle plan, no stubborn resolve can ever truly conquer. John rises, dusts off his pants, and heads toward the farmhouse, the scent of freshly baked bread drifting from the kitchen. His wife hums softly, stirring stew over the fire, and for a moment everything feels as it should. The world is unpredictable, brutal even, but within these walls there is warmth, there is steadiness. And as the evening settles in, John knows one thing for sure: he will plant again, he will harvest again, he will endure. The evening air is soft, carrying the scent of damp earth and lingering wheat. John sits on his porch nursing a cup of tea, the warmth grounding him after another long day. The town has settled into its usual rhythm, farmers tending to chores, the last rays of sunlight filtering through the trees, and then amidst the quiet comes a voice, small, curious. Why don't they just talk to the emus? John glances toward the speaker, a child perched on the edge of the steps, swinging their legs idly. The question isn't meant to be profound, but there's something in its simplicity that makes John pause. If only things were that easy. If only solving problems didn't require rifles and strategies, but rather a conversation, a shared understanding. He chuckles, shaking his head. Now wouldn't that be something? He muses, looking out toward the horizon where the birds roam free. The emus are relentless, resistant, moving through the land as if it were theirs alone. Perhaps in a way it is. The child watches him, their expression open, waiting. John exhales, shifting in his chair. Sometimes talking isn't enough, he says gently. Sometimes folks are too stubborn to listen. The child considers this, then nods, satisfied. And as the night deepens, John finds himself wondering, when was the last time anyone truly listened to the land, rather than trying to bend it to their will? The moon hangs high, bathing the fields in silver light. The air is thick with dust and determination as the soldiers regroup, their uniforms rumpled, their boots worn. Meredith stands among them, arms crossed, eyes scanning the land ahead. He refuses to concede. The first effort may have been a disaster, but this time it'll be different. At least that's the plan. The men whisper among themselves, their voices hushed with cautious optimism. They've studied the emu's movements, planned their ambushes with precision. It reminds John of the church potluck, how the ladies planned every dish down to the last slice of pie, as if a flawless strategy could prevent the inevitable. And, just like the pie at the potluck, their plan starts to crumble. The moment the soldiers fire, the emus scatter, not just running but dodging, twisting through the fields like ghosts, vanishing into the brush before a second shot can be taken. The men scramble, adjusting their aim, trying to outmaneuver creatures that seem to know every shortcut, every hiding place in this vast land. John watches from his porch, shaking his head with quiet amusement. He's seen enough harvest to know nature never plays fair. You can plan, you can prepare, but the land has its own way of doing things. And tonight, once again, the emus remind the soldiers that no amount of firepower can outmatch pure instinct. Meredith exhales sharply, rubbing his temples, frustration settling in like an unwanted houseguest. It's clear now, this isn't just a battle of men versus birds. It's a battle of pride. And from the way things are going, nature's winning. The land knows no mercy. It does not yield to rifles, nor does it bow to human plans. The soldiers, weary and dust-laden, begin to understand this as another wave of emus vanishes into the scrub, leaving only the whisper of their retreat in the evening breeze. The second attack was meant to be different, tighter formations, better timing, but it has ended just as the first, with frustration hanging thick in the air. John watches from his porch, arms resting on his knees, eyes following the movement of the land rather than the men upon it. He's seen this kind of struggle before, not with emus, but with droughts that overstayed their welcome, with storms that refused to bend to human wishes. Nature has a way of reminding folks that it does not bargain, it does not make deals, it simply is. Meredith exhales sharply, shaking his head as he rubs his temples. He has fought in real wars where enemies could be outmaneuvered, defeated. But this isn't an enemy. It's the land itself pushing back. And no man, no matter how many weapons he carries, can outmatch the unshaken rhythm of nature. John takes a slow sip of his tea, letting the warmth settle. He knows what comes next. The soldiers will try again, though the result will likely be the same. And in the end, they will leave. But the emus will remain, moving through the land as they have, for generations, steady, enduring, untamed. The campfire crackles, sending up wisps of smoke into the cool night air. The villagers sit in a loose circle, their voices hushed, their laughter softened after the long day. The soldiers have retreated once more, the emus victorious yet again, and now there is little else to do but share stories, reflect, and accept what cannot be changed. John leans back against an old wooden crate, listening as one of the elders clears his throat. His face is lined with years of labor, of understanding the land in a way younger men have yet to learn. "You can't outsmart nature," he says finally, his voice rough but steady. "It doesn't move for us. We move with it." The words settle over the group like a blanket, simple but undeniable. Meredith sits a few paces away, his jaw set, hands clasped tight. He doesn't argue, doesn't protest. Maybe after everything, even he can't deny that the battle was never truly winnable. John watches as the firelight dances in the old man's eyes. His grandmother used to say something similar. Slow as molasses, but it gets there eventually. The land moves in its own time, its own rhythm, and fighting against it is as foolish as trying to chase down the wind. The villagers nod in quiet agreement, and as the stars blink overhead, the mood shifts. The war against the emus is no longer a spectacle or a frustration. It is simply another tale to add to the long history of mankind learning, again and again, that nature will always have the upper hand. The horizon stretches wide, painted in hues of dusky purple and orange as the last light of day fades. The emus move steadily, their long strides carving silent paths through the land, their figures outlined against the dimming sky. There is no hesitation, no wavering, only the certainty of creatures that have always known their place in this world. John watches from his porch, eyes following their movement, their rhythm. It's an odd thing, this war, if one can even call it that. Wars are supposed to have winners and losers, but here, nature does not concern itself with victory or defeat. It simply is. The emus march on, relentless, indifferent to human efforts, a reminder that the land belongs not just to those who plant in it, but also to those who run across it, wild and free. Meredith stands nearby, hands on his hips, his expression unreadable. He has fought battles before, ones with clear objectives, clear outcomes. But this fight against creatures that neither flee nor surrender, is something else entirely. He exhales, staring at the fading sunlight, and for the first time, John wonders if Meredith has begun to understand. The villagers speak in low voices, some still shaking their heads at the absurdity, others simply accepting that this will never be a war in the way they had imagined. The emus march on, Not to conquer, not to claim, but simply to survive. And perhaps in the end that is all that truly matters. The dust settles, hanging in the twilight air like a reluctant sigh. Meredith stands rigid, hands clenched at his sides, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. His men are tired, boots dragging, brows slick with sweat, but the emus, those impossible birds, remain untouched, their long legs carrying them effortlessly across the land. John watches him from a distance, arms crossed, the porch wood creaking beneath his weight. He's seen this kind of stubbornness before, in farmers who refused to accept a failed season, in men who clung to plans long past their usefulness. Meredith is no different, determined to force his will upon something that refuses to be tamed. A soldier coughs, shifting his rifle, and someone mutters about the heat, about the dust, about how this all seems ridiculous now. Meredith hears, but he doesn't respond. His pride won't allow it. Instead he exhales sharply, staring out at the horizon, where the emus are little more than silhouettes against the deepening sky. John sighs, shaking his head. "You ever try starting a tractor that don't want to start?" he calls out, voice carrying across the quiet field. Meredith doesn't answer, but John continues anyway. "You cuss at it, kick the tires, maybe even talk sweet to it, but if it's got its mind made up, well, nothing you do is going to change that." A few of the soldiers chuckle, the tension easing just slightly. Meredith remains stiff, unmoved, but in the way his shoulders shift, John wonders if maybe, just maybe, he's starting to realize that brute force won't win this fight. The kitchen smells of warm bread and simmering stew, filling the air with comfort after the long, dusty day. John sits at the worn wooden table, rubbing his hands together before breaking off a piece of bread, savoring the simple pleasure of something homemade. Across from him, his wife stirs the pot with practiced ease, humming a tune that has lived in her heart for as long as he can remember. Outside, the villagers gather under the soft glow of lanterns, sharing a meal as they do every evening. There's something steady about these moments, the way food, laughter, and quiet conversation stitch together the fabric of their lives. The emu war might be the talk of the town, might be filling their days with frustration and amusement alike, but in the end, life carries on. Crops still need tending, fences still need mending, and supper still needs to be shared. Meredith sits among them, his face unreadable. The fight hasn't gone as planned, and yet here he is, welcomed at the table, as if his struggle with the emus is no different from any other hardship this town has faced. And in a way, maybe it isn't. John watches as bowls are passed, bread is torn, and laughter rises in easy waves, weaving through the night air like a melody. The war isn't over, and neither is the frustration, but for now there is food, there is warmth, and there is a quiet reminder that no matter how absurd the world seems, people always find their way back to each other. The night has settled, wrapping the land in a blanket of quiet. The laughter from supper has faded, replaced by the soft hum of crickets and the occasional sigh of wind through the fields. John stands outside, hands in his pockets, gazing across the open stretch of land. There's something about this stillness, about how the world for just a moment seems to pause. He takes a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, carrying with it the scent of wheat and earth. The emus are out there somewhere, hidden, in the darkness, resting just as the farmers do. For all the chaos they've caused, they're as much a part of this land as he is. Not enemies, not invaders, just another force moving through the rhythm of nature. John remembers evenings like this from his childhood, nights when his father would sit on the porch rocking in his chair, staring at the same horizon. He'd talk about how some things can't be fought, only respected. The wind, the rain, the land. Maybe, just maybe, the emus belong on that list too. The farmhouse door creaks open behind him. His wife steps out, handing him a mug of warm cider, her fingers brushing his briefly. He takes it, nodding his thanks, and they stand together in silence, watching the stars, letting the stillness settle deep into their bones. The land is old, older than the fences, older than the roads, older than the men who now stand upon it trying to shape it to their will. The emus know this. They move through it not as intruders, but as creatures who belong, who have traced these same paths long before anyone ever thought to tame them. John leans against his porch railing, watching the way they move, their strides sure and steady. There are no maps for them, no guiding markers. They simply know. He remembers the deer trails behind his childhood home, the way his grandfather pointed them out, saying they had been used for generations. The emus have their own trails, unseen by human eyes but carved deep into the memory of the land. Meredith watches too, though his gaze is harder, more calculating. He spent days trying to predict their movements, trying to outmaneuver creatures that seemed to have an understanding of the land that no soldier could match. And still, they disappear, slipping into the brush, following paths invisible to all but them. John exhales, shaking his head slightly. Some things can't be conquered. Some things simply are. As the last emu vanishes into the evening shadows, he wonders if Meredith is finally beginning to see it too. The morning sun bathes the wheat field in soft gold, illuminating patches of land where the stalks still stand tall, where they've survived, untouched by the chaos. John kneels beside one such patch, running his fingers through the sturdy stems, feeling the weight of their endurance. They're not much, certainly not enough to bring a proper harvest, but they are something. He exhales, leaning back onto his heels. Some might call it a small victory, but to John it's more than that. It's proof that not everything was lost, that in the wake of destruction there is still something worth salvaging. His father once told him that farming wasn't about control. It was about resilience. You don't win against the land, you work with it. He stands, brushing the dust off his hands. The emus are long gone now, scattered into the hills and brush, their footprints trailing off into the distance. Meredith might still be brooding over the battle lost, still convinced that something could have been done differently. But John knows better. Some fights aren't meant to be won. Some battles serve only to remind you of what really matters. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of warm earth and promise. He'll plant again. He'll rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. The morning arrives, crisp and clear, bringing with it a renewed sense of resolve among the soldiers. Meredith stands at the edge of the field, his jaw set, hands clasped behind his back. He isn't ready to concede, not yet. The emus have outmaneuvered them at every turn, but today they will try once more. John watches from the porch, sipping his coffee, the steam curling lazily into the cool air. He's seen this kind of determination before, the kind that clings to a man even when reason says to let go. Meredith reminds him of farmers ploughing through rocky soil, refusing to admit defeat, convinced that just a little more effort will change the outcome. The soldiers adjust their rifles, murmuring amongst themselves. The plan is simple: a tighter formation, a more controlled assault, a final stand against the creatures that have turned them into the laughingstock of the countryside. But as soon as the first shots ring out, the emus scatter, once again defying every expectation. John exhales, shaking his head. The land has already chosen its victor. The men may fire, may chase, may regroup, but the emus will remain there. Long strides carrying them farther and faster than human frustration can ever hope to catch. Meredith grips his rifle tighter, but deep down he knows it too. The last shots have faded, swallowed by the vastness of the land. The soldiers lower, their rifles exchanging looks, some resigned, some frustrated, some quietly amused. The emus are gone again, vanishing into the brush like whispers in the wind, leaving behind nothing but footprints and unanswered questions. Meredith stands still, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to be different. They had planned, adjusted, tried again with renewed determination, and yet nature has proven once more that it bends for no man. John watches from his porch, arms crossed, a knowing glint in his eyes. He's seen this lesson unfold before, not in battle but in seasons that refused to give, in storms that didn't listen to prayers, in crops that failed despite a farmer's best efforts. The land doesn't bargain, it doesn't bow to strategy, it simply is, and it demands respect. Slowly, Meredith exhales, loosening his grip, shoulders sagging just slightly. Perhaps this isn't just about birds or bullets. Perhaps this is about accepting that not all fights are meant to be won. Some are meant to remind a man of his place, that the land is ancient, relentless, and indifferent to human frustration. John chuckles softly, shaking his head. Sometimes, he says, voice carrying across the quiet field, you've just got to let the land win. The wheat field is quiet now, save for the gentle rustle of stalks swaying in the breeze. The chaos of the past days, the shouting, the gunfire, the frustrated pacing of soldiers, has faded, leaving behind only the land, unchanged, untamed. John walks along the edge of his field, eyes scanning the ground. Beneath the trampled stalks, beneath the dust, something stirs. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil, reaching upward. He kneels, tracing his fingers over the fresh growth, the unmistakable proof that nature, despite all efforts to control, it will always find a way. He exhales, a quiet chuckle slipping past his lips. His father used to say that you don't fight the land, you listen to it. You let it teach you. And here in this quiet moment, the land is teaching him yet again. The emus have come and gone. The soldiers will soon leave. But the earth will remain stubborn in its promise to grow, to rebuild, to endure. John rises, brushing the dirt from his hands. The world is unpredictable, cruel even, but nature never forgets its rhythm, and no matter how many battles are fought, no matter how much land is trampled, life always pushes forward, slow and steady, like the sunrise creeping over the horizon. The kitchen smells of warm bread and simmering stew, filling the air with comfort after the long, dusty day. John sits at the worn wooden table, rubbing his hands together before breaking off a piece of bread, savoring the simple pleasure of something homemade. Across from him, his wife stirs the pot with practiced ease, humming a tune that has lived in her heart for as long as he can remember. Outside, the villagers gather under the soft glow of lanterns, sharing a meal as they do every evening. There's something steady about these moments, the way food, laughter, and quiet conversation stitch together the fabric of their lives. The emu war might be the talk of the town, might be filling their days with frustration and amusement alike, but in the end, life carries on. Crops still need tending, fences still need mending, and supper still needs to be shared. Meredith sits among them, his face unreadable. The fight hasn't gone as planned, and yet here he is, welcomed at the table, as if his struggle with the emus is no different from any other hardship this town has faced. And in a way, maybe it isn't. John watches as bowls are passed, bread is torn, and laughter rises in easy waves, weaving through the night air like a melody. The war isn't over, and neither is the frustration, but for now there is food, there is warmth, and there is a quiet reminder that no matter how absurd the world seems, people always find their way back to each other. The night has settled, wrapping the land in a blanket of quiet. The laughter from supper has faded, replaced by the soft hum of crickets and the occasional sigh of wind through the fields. John stands outside, hands in his pockets, gazing across the open stretch of land. There's something about this stillness, about how the world for just a moment seems to pause. He takes a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, carrying with it the scent of wheat and earth. The emus are out there somewhere, hidden in the darkness, resting just as the farmers do. For all the chaos they've caused, they're as much a part of this land as he is. Not enemies, not invaders, just another force moving through the rhythm of nature. John remembers evenings like this from his childhood, nights when his father would sit on the porch, rocking in his chair, staring at the same horizon. He'd talk about how some things can't be fought, only respected. The wind, the rain, the land. Maybe, just maybe, the emus belong on that list too. The farmhouse door creaks open behind him. His wife steps out, handing him a mug of warm cider, her fingers brushing his briefly. He takes it, nodding his thanks, and they stand together in silence, watching the stars, letting the stillness settle deep into their bones. The land is old, older than the fences, older than the roads, older than the men who now stand upon it trying to shape it to their will. The emus know this. They move through it not as intruders, but as creatures who belong, who have traced these same paths long before anyone ever thought to tame them. John leans against his porch railing, watching the way they move, their strides sure and steady. There are no maps for them, no guiding markers. They simply know. He remembers the deer trails behind his childhood home, the way his grandfather pointed them out, saying they had been used for generations. The emus have their own trails, unseen by human eyes but carved deep into the memory of the land. Meredith watches too, though his gaze is harder, more calculating. He spent days trying to predict their movements, trying to outmaneuver creatures that seemed to have an understanding of the land that no soldier could match. And still, they disappear, slipping into the brush, following paths invisible to all but them. John exhales, shaking his head slightly. Some things can't be conquered. Some things simply are. As the last emu vanishes into the evening shadows, he wonders if Meredith is finally beginning to see it too. The morning sun bathes the wheat field in soft gold, illuminating patches of land where the stalks still stand tall, where they've survived, untouched by the chaos. John kneels beside one such patch, running his fingers through the sturdy stems, feeling the weight of their endurance. They're not much, certainly not enough to bring a proper harvest, but they are something. He exhales, leaning back onto his heels. Some might call it a small victory, but to John it's more than that. It's proof that not everything was lost, that in the wake of destruction there is still something worth salvaging. His father once told him that farming wasn't about control. It was about resilience. You don't win against the land, you work with it. He stands brushing the dust off his hands. The emus are long gone now, scattered into the hills and brush, their footprints trailing off into the distance. Meredith might still be brooding over the battle lost, still convinced that something could have been done differently. But John knows better. Some fights aren't meant to be won. Some battles serve only to remind you of what really matters. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of warm earth and promise. He'll plant again. He'll rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. The morning arrives, crisp and clear, bringing with it a renewed sense of resolve among the soldiers. Meredith stands at the edge of the field, his jaw set, hands clasped behind his back. He isn't ready to concede, not yet. The emus have outmaneuvered them at every turn, but today they will try once more. John watches from the porch, sipping his coffee, the steam curling lazily into the cool air. He's seen this kind of determination before, the kind that clings to a man even when reason says to let go. Meredith reminds him of farmers ploughing through rocky soil, refusing to admit defeat, convinced that just a little more effort will change the outcome. The soldiers adjust their rifles, murmuring amongst themselves. The plan is simple. A tighter formation, a more controlled assault, a final stand against the creatures that have turned them into the laughingstock of the countryside. But as soon as the first shots ring out, the emus scatter, once again defying every expectation. John exhales, shaking his head. The land has already chosen its victor. The men may fire, may chase, may regroup, but the emus will remain there. Long strides carrying them farther and faster than human frustration can ever hope to catch. Meredith grips his rifle tighter, but deep down he knows it too. The last shots have faded, swallowed by the vastness of the land. The soldiers lower, their rifles exchanging looks, some resigned, some frustrated, some quietly amused. The emus are gone again, vanishing into the brush like whispers in the wind, leaving behind nothing but footprints and unanswered questions. Meredith stands still, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to be different. They had planned, adjusted, tried again with renewed determination, and yet nature has proven once more that it bends for no man. John watches from his porch, arms crossed, a knowing glint in his eyes. He's seen this lesson unfold before, not in battle but in seasons that refused to give, in storms that didn't listen to prayers, in crops that failed despite a farmer's best efforts. The land doesn't bargain, it doesn't bow to strategy, it simply is, and it demands respect. Slowly, Meredith exhales, loosening his grip, shoulders sagging just slightly. Perhaps this isn't just about birds or bullets. Perhaps this is about accepting that not all fights are meant to be won. Some are meant to remind a man of his place, that the land is ancient, relentless, and indifferent to human frustration. John chuckles softly, shaking his head. Sometimes, he says, voice carrying across the quiet field, you've just got to let the land win. The wheat field is quiet now, save for the gentle rustle of stalks swaying in the breeze. The chaos of the past days, the shouting, the gunfire, the frustrated pacing of soldiers, has faded, leaving behind only the land, unchanged, untamed. John walks along the edge of his field, eyes scanning the ground. Beneath the trampled stalks, beneath the dust, something stirs. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil, reaching upward. He kneels, tracing his fingers over the fresh growth, the unmistakable proof that nature, despite all efforts to control. It will always find a way. He exhales, a quiet chuckle slipping past his lips. His father used to say that you don't fight the land, you listen to it. You let it teach you. And here in this quiet moment, the land is teaching him yet again. The emus have come and gone. The soldiers will soon leave. But the earth will remain stubborn in its promise to grow, to rebuild, to endure. John rises, brushing the dirt from his hands. The world is unpredictable, cruel even, but nature never forgets its rhythm. And no matter how many battles are fought, no matter how much land is trampled, life always pushes forward, slow and steady, like the sunrise creeping over the horizon. Time moves forward, carrying the story of the Emu War with it. What was once frustration, once folly, has transformed into legend, a tale that will linger in dusty books, in barroom conversations, in the quiet chuckles of farmers who remember. John stands at the edge of his field, watching the wheat sway in the evening breeze. The emus are out there, unseen for now, but never far. They belong to this land, stitched into its fabric as much as the soil beneath his boots. He knows now this was never truly a war. It was a lesson, a reminder that nature, despite all human efforts to control it, will always run free. Meredith has long since left, his trucks kicking up dust as they rolled out of town. He'll return to his post, file his reports, perhaps shake his head at the memory of chasing birds across open fields. But he will remember. They all will. The villagers sip their tea, sharing stories, laughing, nodding knowingly. The emus, in their defiance, have claimed their place, not as enemies, not as pests, but as an indelible part of Australia's history. And as the sun sinks below the horizon, John smiles. The land remains, the emus endure, and life forever. Unpredictable, always finds a way forward. Now word of this emu debacle spread faster than gossip at a church picnic. By Christmas of '32, newspapers from London to New York were chuckling over reports of Australia's feathered foes. The Chicago Tribune ran it alongside their weather report like some folksy joke. Can't you just picture some banker in his three-piece suit nearly spitting out his morning coffee when he read that? Reminds me of when our little town's pumpkin contest made the state paper back in '58. Didn't matter that old man Jenkins' prize winner had split right down the middle. The whole county still talked about it for years. These emus became unlikely. Celebrities, their scrawny necks held high like they'd won some sort of avian medal of honor. And poor Major Meredith, well, he became the butt of more jokes than a politician at a farmers' convention. But here's the thing. Much like that time the Johnson boy accidentally plowed through Mrs. Whittaker's prize roses, only to have the whole town chip in to replant them, this failure brought folks together in the strangest way. The Australian papers started printing cartoons of soldiers tipping their hats to emus, and before long the birds were appearing in advertisements for everything from boot polish to breakfast cereal. Kinda makes you think of those traveling carnivals. That used to come through town when we were kids, doesn't it? Where the most spectacular failures, the strongman who couldn't lift his own weight, the magician whose rabbit escaped, were always the acts people remembered most fondly. There's a lesson there, I reckon, about how sometimes losing with grace sticks in folks' memories longer than winning with pride. Now let me tell you what the historians still argue about over their tea and scones. You know, this whole emu war. Business got folks talking about something we've wrestled with since the first farmer planted the first seed. When is it right to kill for your crops? Old man Henderson down the road used to say it's no different than swatting flies at a picnic. But my Grandma Ruth, bless her heart, would chase raccoons out of her garden with nothing but a broom and some choice words. The soldiers out there in Campion must have felt mighty conflicted, like that time our county debated whether to shoot the wild dogs bothering the sheep herds. I remember sitting at the general store, listening to the men argue. Some saying it's nature's way, others quoting scripture about stewardship. Same exact arguments they were having in Australia, just swap dingoes for emus. Funny how the world works, ain't it? Whether you're in Kansas or Queensland, a farmer's heart breaks the same when he sees his livelihood disappearing down some creature's gullet. But here's what keeps historians up at night. Those emus weren't some invasive species. They'd been wandering those plains longer than the farmers had. Makes you wonder who was really trespassing on who. Reminds me of something my cousin wrote. From the war, said sometimes both sides think they're the good guys. Difference was these good guys had feathers and could run 30 miles an hour. Now sip your coffee and ponder that a while. The sun dips low over Campion's fields now, painting the red earth with hues of orange and pink as the villagers start to see a different way forward, one that flows with nature's rhythm rather than against it. You're walking alongside John as he adjusts a makeshift fence, the rough wood scraping your fingers, the scent of freshly cut timber mingling with the dry grass. His hands move with a steady grace, like your grandpa carving a rocking chair by the fireplace on a cold Idaho night, and you can feel the shift in his spirit. Less fight, more acceptance. The emus still roam the edges, their silhouettes bobbing against the twilight, but the tension's easing, replaced by a quiet understanding that's as comforting as a warm slice of apple pie on a porch swing. Here's a little nugget most don't realize. Those fences weren't just barriers. They guided the emus to less fertile land, a strategy born from trial and error that turned conflict into coexistence. Historians still debate whether this was a stroke of genius or just plain luck, but it worked better than any bullet. You chuckle. Softly, imagine the emus sending thank you notes for the new walking path, penned with their beaks. John pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, and mutters about how the land teaches you patience if you let it, reminds you of your own day's planting, by the moon's phases, watching crops grow slow as molasses. The villagers gather near the old oak, their voices blending with the evening crickets sharing stories of resilience, like that time your town rebuilt the church steeple after a storm, everyone pitching in with a smile. It's a lesson in harmony, one that lingers like the smell of hay after a good harvest. The twilight deepens over Campion's fields, the red earth now a soft shadow under the fading light, and you sense a connection to something bigger as the villagers' new approach starts to take root. You're sitting with John near the fence line, the cool evening breeze brushing your face like a whisper from an Ohio cornfield, carrying the scent of wildflowers and a hint of smoke from a distant fire. His eyes follow the emus as they wander to the less fertile patches, and you can feel his relief. Like that time your family finally got the old well pump working after days of hauling water buckets, a small victory worth celebrating with a glass of sweet tea. But there's a shadow looming, a new war whispered about, one tied to the changing skies and vanishing lands. Here's a truth that hits close to home. Climate change is stirring up trouble today, with droughts and wildfires hitting Australia. Hard, much like those dust storms that swept through Kansas back in your youth. Historians still debate whether we've learned from past mistakes or if we're just repeating them with fancier tools. You chuckle softly. Imagine the emus packing sunscreen and heading for the hills, leaving us to figure out the mess. John leans back, his voice low, saying the land's teaching us to adapt, not fight. And it reminds you of your grandpa's wisdom about planting trees for the next generation, even if he'd never see the shade. The villagers hum an old tune by the fire, their harmony as steady as a church choir, a reminder that community endures. Bless their hearts, they're holding on to hope like it's the last quilt on a cold night. The night wraps Campion in a quiet embrace now, the stars twinkling above like fireflies caught in a Carolina sky, as the legacy of this strange war begins to settle into something timeless. You're sitting by the fading fire with the villagers, the warmth of the embers glowing like the memory of your grandma's quilt, draped over your shoulders on a chilly evening. John's voice is soft as he shares how this whole ordeal taught them humility, a lesson as lasting as the oak tree standing tall by the barn, its roots deep just like the stories passed down at family reunions. The emus, still wandering the edges of the field, seem less like enemies now, more like neighbors you've learned to live with, much like the foxes your grandpa let be after they stopped raiding the henhouse. Here's a curious detail. Years later, this war became a badge of honor for Australians, a tale of grit and laughter that shaped their identity. Not unlike how your town still talks about that big flood of '62 with a mix of pride and chuckles. Historians still debate whether the humility learned here truly changed farming practices or just made for good campfire stories. You smile. Imagine the emus being invited to the reunion, showing up with their own tall tales. The fire crackles, and the villagers' voices drift into a lullaby, their words weaving a tapestry of resilience that feels as comforting as a hymn sung at a small-town church. It's a reminder that sometimes the best lessons come from the hardest days, like the ones you faced fixing fences with your dad, knowing the work would outlast you both. Bless their hearts, they've turned defeat into wisdom under these stars. The fire's embers glow softer now, casting a warm flicker across Campion's fields as you lean back, letting the story of this feathered defeat weave its final threads. You're tracing the journey in your mind, from the harsh days of the Great Depression, when John's hopes hung by a thread, to the comical clash with those emus, and finally to this quiet acceptance that feels like sitting on your porch in Ohio, watching the sunset paint the sky after a long harvest. The villagers' laughter lingers in the air, a sound as sweet as the last bite of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, blending with the cricket's song, a reminder that even failure can taste like victory when shared with good company. John's eyes crinkle as he nods, his voice low. We learn to laugh at ourselves, and that's worth more than gold. Here's a quirky truth. After the war, the emu's reputation grew so much that they became a symbol of resilience, their story, echoing in Aussie folklore like your own tales of the old barn raising in '68, where everyone pitched in with a grin. Historians still debate whether this turned a military blunder into a cultural triumph, or if it was just a happy accident. You chuckle. Imagine the emus getting medals, strutting around like they won the county fair best in show. The night deepens, and the wind carries a gentle rustle through the grass, like the pages of your grandma's recipe book, turning slowly, each memory a lesson in humility and humor. It's a journey of defeat that somehow feels like a gift, wrapping you in peace as the stars above Campion shine like the lanterns at a small-town festival. Bless their hearts, they've turned a mess into a dream worth dreaming. The stars above Campion twinkle a little brighter now, their light a gentle guide as you sit by the fading fire, the embers glowing like the last coals in your old fireplace back in Kansas. The story of this peculiar war whispers a message for tomorrow, one that feels as timeless as the advice your grandpa gave about tending the land. Live simply, respect nature, and don't try to outsmart something that's been here longer than you. John's hands rest on his knees, his calloused fingers tracing the worn fabric of his overalls, and you can sense the wisdom settling in, like the comfort of a warm quilt on a chilly night. The emus, still lingering at the field's edge, seem to nod in agreement, their silhouettes a reminder that nature always has the final say, much like those stubborn storms that roll through South Carolina every spring. Here's a thought-provoking detail. Decades after this war, farmers in Australia started using native plants to deter emus, a nod to working with the land rather than against it, a lesson we're still learning with today's push for sustainable farming. Historians still debate whether this war could have taught us more about balance sooner, or if we're just slow as molasses when it comes to listening. You smile softly. Imagine the emus as professors, giving us a lecture on eco-friendly living, with a feathered flip chart. The villagers' voices fade into a soft hum, their stories of resilience blending with the night's chorus of crickets, and you're reminded of your own family's lessons. Plant for tomorrow, even if you won't see the harvest. It's a message that wraps you in peace, like the glow of fireflies on a warm Ohio night. Bless their hearts, they've left a legacy that's more than just a funny story. The first light of dawn creeps over Campion's fields, a soft glow, kissing the red earth as life begins to stir once more, and you're standing with John, watching the world wake up. The air carries the fresh scent of dew on the grass, mingling with the faint aroma of baked bread from the village ovens, a comfort as familiar as the smell of biscuits wafting from your kitchen in Virginia on a quiet morning. The emus are out. There their silhouettes moving gracefully across the less fertile patches, no longer a threat, but part of the rhythm now, like the deer that graze near your old barn back home. John's face softens, a smile tugging at his lips as he adjusts his hat. Life goes on, steady as the ticking of your grandpa's mantle clock, and you feel a warmth that settles deep, like a sip of hot cider by the hearth. Here's a gentle truth. After the chaos, the farmers and emus found a balance, with fences guiding the birds away, a practice that echoes the way your neighbors once redirected a wandering cow with a kind word and a pat. Historians still debate whether this peace was intentional or just nature's way of sorting things out, but it worked. You chuckle. Imagine the emus holding a meeting to thank the fences, nodding politely like guests at a church supper. The villagers start their day, their voices low and warm as they share a simple breakfast, the clink of cups blending with the morning birdsong, reminding you of those summer days when your family gathered on the porch, sharing stories and gratitude. It's a scene of resilience, a quiet promise that tomorrow will come, wrapped in the golden light of a new dawn. Bless their hearts, they've turned struggle into something beautiful. The dawn light softens over Campion, its golden rays stretching across the red fields like a warm blanket, and you're reminded of why Sleepy History Narratives exists in the first place, to bring these tales to you like a dream, gentle and soothing, as if your grandma's telling you bedtime stories by the fireplace. You're sitting with the villagers, the scent of fresh bread still lingering, their voices now a soft murmur as they tidy up from breakfast, the clink of dishes fading into the morning breeze. It's a moment of peace, much like those quiet evenings in Virginia, when you'd listen to the crickets while sipping sweet tea on the porch, letting the day's worries slip away. John's hat sits on the fence post, a silent witness to the lessons learned here, and you feel the purpose of this journey, to help you unwind, to carry you into a restful sleep with the past whispering in your ear. Here's a little insight, Sleepy. History isn't just about facts. It's about feeling the heartbeat of those who came before us, like how this war taught humility in a way no textbook could. Historians still debate whether stories like these truly capture the spirit of the time or just romanticize it. But for now, it's about the calm they bring. You smile. Imagine the emus tucking you in, their feathers as soft as a pillow. The wind rustles through the grass, a sound as familiar as the creak of your old rocking chair, and the villagers' laughter fades into a lullaby, wrapping you in a sense of connection to history. It's a mission to make the past a safe haven, a place where you can drift off, dreaming of simpler times. Bless their hearts, they've given you a story to hold on to as the dawn glows brighter. The morning breeze dances gently over Campion's fields, carrying a whisper of wildflowers as you settle into a quiet moment with the villagers, their voices fading into a peaceful hum. You're leaning against the old oak tree, its bark rough against your back, the scent of dew-soaked earth rising like a memory of your grandma's garden after a spring rain in Ohio. John joins you, his breath steady as he guides you to breathe deeply, letting the tension slip away like leaves falling from a maple in autumn. Inhale slow, he says, his voice a soft drawl. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it, then let it go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You feel your shoulders drop, the weight of the day easing as the emu's distant calls blend with the wind, a natural lullaby that wraps you in calm. Here's a soothing detail. Breathing like this was a trick farmers used back then to steady themselves after long days, a practice that's as old as the hills and just as effective. Historians still ponder whether it was pure instinct or a wisdom passed down from generations, but it works wonders. You smile. Imagine the emus joining in, puffing out their chests for a deep breath, like they're practicing yoga by the fence. The villagers' soft chatter fades, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of cicadas, reminiscent of those summer nights on your porch when the world seemed to pause. John's words linger, encouraging you to let go, to sink into the earth's embrace, and you feel sleep tugging at the edges of your mind. Bless his heart, he's turning this hard-earned peace into a gift for you to carry into dreams. A soft glow lingers over Campion as the morning unfolds, the red fields shimmering under the early sun, like a painting you'd see at a small-town fair in Kansas, and you feel an invitation stirring in the air. You're standing near John's fence, the wood still warm from yesterday's sun, the faint scent of wild sage brushing past as the villagers' footsteps crunch softly on the dirt path. Their voices are a gentle hum now, like the murmur of neighbors at a Sunday potluck, and you're reminded that sleepy history narratives has so much more to share, each story a new dream waiting to unfold, as comforting as flipping through your grandpa's old photo album by the fireplace. There's a promise here, to carry you through the past with a tender touch, helping you drift into sleep with tales that feel like home. Here's a little-known gem. The art of storytelling has been a way to pass down lessons since ancient times. And in Campion, these tales of resilience became bedtime stories for generations, much like the ones your family shared about the big snow of '55. Historians still wonder if these stories shaped the community's spirit or simply kept the nights warm with laughter. You chuckle. Imagine the emus listening in, their heads tilted like curious kids at story time. The wind picks up, rustling through the grass with a sound as familiar as the creak of your porch swing, whispering for you to explore more tales of lost ships, forgotten towns, or quirky battles. each one a lullaby waiting to wrap you in peace. It's an open door to dream again, under the same stars that watched Campion's story unfold. Bless their hearts, they're ready to guide you to another journey. The sun climbs higher over Campion, its rays filtering through the trees to dapple the red earth with light, and a sense of gratitude settles over you like the shade of an old oak on a hot Kansas afternoon. You're sitting with the villagers near John's porch, the creak of the steps blending with their soft voices, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting like a memory of your grandma's kitchen on a quiet Sunday. They turn to you now, their eyes warm with thanks for listening to this tale, their words a gentle thank you under the moonlight that feels as heartfelt as a hug at a family reunion. It's a moment that wraps you in connection, reminding you of those small-town gatherings in Virginia, where everyone pitched in, turning hard times into shared laughter and love. Here's a tender detail. These stories of Campion became a way for the community to bond, much like how your town's harvest festival brought folks together with pies and prayers, a tradition that's held strong through the years. Historians still ponder whether these tales strengthened the village's spirit or simply gave them something to smile about, but the warmth is undeniable. You smile. Imagine the emus bowing in thanks, their feathers ruffled like a polite nod, at a church supper. The wind carries a soft rustle, mingling with the distant hum of bees, and you feel the villagers' appreciation deepen, their voices fading into a lullaby that echoes with the resilience of those who came before. It's a thank you that lingers, like the glow of fireflies on a summer night. Bless their hearts, they've made this journey a shared gift under the stars. The golden light of morning bathes Campion's fields in a gentle warmth, the red earth glowing like the embers of last night's fire, and you feel a quiet farewell settling in as the villagers' voices fade into the distance. You're standing near John's fence, the wood smooth under your fingertips, the air carrying the soft scent of dew-kissed grass, a smell that reminds you of early mornings in South Carolina, picking blackberries with your family. It's time to wish you a good night, and John's voice is a soothing whisper. Sleep well, dream of those emus running free on the red field. Picture them now, their long legs striding gracefully under the dawn, their feathers catching the light like a shimmering quilt, a sight as peaceful as fireflies dancing on a warm Ohio night, guiding you into a restful slumber. Here's a calming detail. Emus often run in patterns that follow the land's natural contours, a rhythm as old as time, much like the way your grandpa's horses knew the trails back home without a map. Historians still wonder if this instinct helped them survive the war, or if it was just their way of dancing with the earth. You smile. Imagine the emus inviting you to their dawn parade, leading the way with a feathered march. The wind hums softly, blending with the distant chirp of morning birds, a melody that wraps you in serenity, like the sound of your old rocking chair creaking on the porch. John's words linger, a tender good night that feels like a hug from the past. Bless his heart, he's sending you off to dream of simpler times where the red fields and emus become a lullaby under the stars. The morning sun casts long shadows across Campion's red fields, the air crisp with the scent of dew as you linger near John's porch, the creak of the wooden steps underfoot, a familiar echo of your own back in Virginia. The villagers are starting their day, their voices a soft hum as they share a simple breakfast, but now they turn to you with a warm invitation, their eyes bright like the glow of lanterns at a harvest festival. They'd love to hear your thoughts. In the comments, how did this story make you feel, and what's your favorite historical tale? It's a connection that feels as cozy as swapping stories over pie at the local diner. their words encouraging you to share, much like neighbors chatting over the fence about the old days. Here's a heartfelt detail. These shared stories often became a way for Campion's folks to feel closer, a tradition not unlike how your family would gather after a big meal to talk about the past, passing down lessons with every laugh. Historians still wonder if this war tale inspired more storytelling in the village, or if it just gave them a reason to gather. You smile. Imagine the emus leaving a comment too, squawking about their side of the story. The breeze rustles through. The grass, a sound as comforting as the crickets on a summer night, urging you to join the conversation. It's a chance to keep this journey alive, to let the past whisper back through your words. Bless their hearts, they're building a bridge between Campion and your own memories, one story at a time. A gentle rustle stirs the air over Campion's fields, the red earth catching the morning light as if hinting at secrets yet to unfold, and you feel a spark of curiosity ignite. You're standing by the old oak tree with John, its leaves whispering in the breeze, the scent of damp soil rising like a promise of new stories from a forgotten time. The villagers pause their chatter, their eyes gleaming with excitement as they hint at what's next, a mystery lurking in an ancient wine cellar, a tale as intriguing as the hidden attic treasures you'd uncover in your grandma's house in Ohio. It's a glimpse into another world, one that beckons with the allure of dusty bottles and whispered legends, ready to carry you into another dream-filled night. Here's a tantalizing detail. Those cellars hold more than wine. They're said to guard journals from a vanished noble, family, their secrets etched in ink as old as the hills of Virginia. Historians still ponder whether these writings reveal a true mystery or just the musings of a bygone era, but the intrigue is irresistible. You chuckle. Imagine the emus sneaking into the cellar, sipping wine and leaving feather clues. The wind picks up, carrying the faint hum of a distant tune, like the melodies played at a small-town fair, and you sense the villagers' eagerness to share this next chapter. It's an invitation to lean in, to let the past unfold with every creak of an old door. Bless their hearts. They're setting the stage for a story that'll linger long after the stars fade. The breeze grows softer over Campion's fields, stirring the red earth with a tender touch as the morning light fades into a golden haze, and you feel the story drawing to a close like a chapter in your grandpa's favorite book. You're standing by John's side, the fence post warm under your hand, the air filled with the faint rustle of grass and the distant call of a morning bird, a melody that echoes the peace of a quiet dawn in Idaho. The wind becomes a final whisper, a lullaby weaving through the fields, its gentle rhythm as soothing as the sound of rain on your tin roof back home, each gust carrying the memory of this journey to lull you into sleep. Picture the emus one last time, their silhouettes fading against the horizon, a graceful goodbye that feels like a promise of restful dreams. Here's a serene detail. The wind in these fields often carried seeds far and wide, a natural dance that helped the land heal after the chaos, much like how wildflowers bloom in your yard after a hard winter. Historians still wonder if this wind played a role in the emus' survival, spreading the very plants they'd eat. You smile. Imagine the wind as a storyteller, whispering good night with every gust. The villagers' voices are gone now, replaced by the hum of nature, a sound as comforting as your old rocking chair creaking on the porch. The wind's final whisper wraps you in peace, guiding you to close your eyes, to let the red fields fade into the darkness of sleep. Bless their hearts. They've given you a lullaby to carry into the night. The golden haze over Campion's fields deepens into a soft twilight glow, The red earth now a canvas of shadows as you feel yourself drifting, the world around you softening like a dream. You're lying back on the grass near John's fence, the blades cool against your skin, the air carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and the distant hum of crickets, a sound as familiar as those summer nights on your porch in Ohio, when the world seemed to hold its breath. The story of the emus and the villagers fades gently, their silhouettes blurring into the horizon, and you're sinking deeper into the night, the stars above twinkling like a blanket of fireflies, guiding you into a place of stillness. Each breath you take feels slower, heavier, as the wind's whisper becomes a distant echo, lulling you like the creak of your grandma's rocking chair. Here's a final soothing detail. The emu's footprints, once a sign of chaos, became part of the land story, etched into the earth like the trails your family's tractor left in the fields, a quiet testament to time's passage. Historians still ponder if these marks inspired the villagers to see the birds as part of their history, not just a foe. You smile faintly. Imagine the emus leaving a good night note in the dirt, scratched with their talons. The night wraps you tighter, the sounds of campion fading into a hush, the grass beneath you a gentle cradle. You're drifting now, the red. Fields melting into the darkness of sleep, a peaceful surrender to the night. Bless their hearts, they've carried you to the edge of dreams with the tenderness of a lullaby. Years pass, seasons shift, but the land remains. The wheat grows, bends under the wind and rises again. The emus still roam, their long strides cutting across the fields, reminders of a story that once seemed like folly, but now feels like something greater, something woven into the identity of the land itself. John stands on his porch watching the horizon as the sky fades from gold to deep blue. The war is long past, a memory now, but its lessons linger. Meredith never returned, though his name is still mentioned in quiet conversations, in the knowing laughs of those who remember. The villagers have rebuilt, planted again, embraced the land as it is, not conquered but understood. The emus, as always, endure. Not out of defiance, not out of victory, but simply because they belong. John takes a slow sip of his tea, letting the evening settle into his bones. The world moves on, the absurdities fade, but the land, stubborn, ancient, unwavering, will always remain. Stories have a way of lingering, woven into the fabric of a place, passed through laughter and quiet contemplation. Sleepy History Narratives has sought to do just that, to bring stories that remind us of resilience, of the quiet wisdom found in nature, and the humor hidden in life's unpredictability. Through history's quirks and human perseverance, each tale speaks of survival, of learning, of moving forward no matter the odds. The emus ran, the land endured, and in the end people found their way, not through conquest but through understanding. And now, as the night settles, may you find rest in knowing that, just like the stories shared here, life continues, steady, enduring, unbound by expectation. Sleep well, and may tomorrow bring wisdom, laughter, and the quiet strength of the land itself.